Welcome everyone. Today we're going to be talking about the Mediator and CQRS pattern. Now there's a couple of videos out there that explain the topic pretty well. What I'm aiming to do is to show you a bare bones example and hopefully cover some ground that I think others haven't touched upon, specifically on how to work with Mediator. There are some good presentation talks on NDC. I can't remember the guy's name, but the project that he works on, North Traders. I'm gonna leave a link for that in the description. That's a very good example. And there is also an explanation by Nick Chappis. That's very good, but again, he just dives into like an application that has a bunch of stuff. So yeah, today I'm gonna just bring a bare bones example, and we're gonna build stuff up step by step, and I'm gonna just show you what is available and what you can use. Okay. Sorry guys, just a quick intermission as I was editing this video. I forgot to mention a few things. Precisely, why would you want to use Mediator or the CQRS pattern? And first and foremost is, if you're not working on production code and you just want to learn it, that is a perfect reason to try it. Go ahead, try to learn CQRS, see what it's about, and see what benefits you can reap from it, right? So the second reason you might want to use the CQRS pattern and Mediator is if your services are calling each other, right? So because you have this box in the middle where when you want to read or write, all of them go through the Mediator in the middle. So a request comes in and then it goes out. So if you want to trigger any request from anywhere, it just has to hit that box in the middle. The third thing is, if you have a large project and you would like cleanliness, in this video you will see how the use of Mediator and its pipelines will help you shrink your controller sizes and basically move your business logic into their respective files, and it will be very easy to traverse the folder structure and find the logic that you're looking for that you think may be at fault. Fourth point is separation of writes and reads, right? So if you, for example, work in a big team and you have a UI team which might want to implement some other UI feature that will require more data from the database, they can just work on that, and the reads are separated from the writes, so they can work freely without having an impact on the, let's say, the model team and the team that works on the backend, and how that logic may distribute notification or writes to some other channel to trigger further services, etc. Right? So if you want to have that split, go ahead and implement it. And also the final point that I would bring is code portability, since you're going to push all your services into a separate project, and from that point on, all of those services are again triggered from the box that is the Mediator, and anywhere where you want to reuse that code, you just go ahead and bring the box along with you, import the project, and there you go. All your services are again accessible through this box. Now, if you are working on a production application and the domain model is simple and you don't need to be doing a lot of stuff when you're writing to the database, so if notifications are not going out, if you're literally just maybe updating a configuration record or something like that, you don't need CQRS, okay? If a simple CRUD API will solve the job, why implement it? It does bring complexity in terms of that you will have to create more files, etc. However, when you build a simple CRUD API with proper abstractions, will result in a lot less code and a lot less complexity, okay? And that's pretty much it. So let's go ahead and get back to the video. So simple example, we just have controllers, and then we have the map default controller route. I'm probably not going to be running the application, or I'll probably run it, but the main point of Mediator is being able to segregate logic in one specific class. So imagine you have let's say 100 actions in this one controller, and all of these actions have some business logic in them. And what Mediator aims to do is basically take that business logic out and put it in a separate class. So the way we basically do this is we take this business logic and let's put it out in that class that is meant to get triggered, right? So I have a second project, because this is essentially what Mediator allows you to do. If you're basically putting all your business logic in these Mediator handlers, what you can do is then grab this project and move it between applications, right? All you have to do is implement Mediator in that application, and you have access to all the commands, and that's essentially the part that basically knows what to trigger based on what you want. For the home controller, let's say that this is something that retrieves information from the database. So let's pin this Solution Explorer, let's go to the services, and let's say that we're working with cars. Okay, so cars are, the car is our model, right? So let's go ahead and make a models folder, and in here I'll just have a car CS, just so it's something to work with, right? So name, doesn't need much more than that. Close that. And then for the services, I will have something along the lines of cars. So these are car services, and I will have queries, and let's say get all cars.cs. Okay, so the get all cars, I will also actually should have named it query. So let's go ahead and rename this to query. So this is a query. This is something that's going to be used by Mediator in order to trigger a call to the handler. Okay, so there are two primary concepts that you need to be aware of, maybe three. Let's say you have the Mediator, the thing in the middle that sort of dispatches all the stuff around. The commander query, which is basically just a message which lets the Mediator know which handler to trigger, right? So you have the Mediator, commander query, and then the handler. Okay, and the Mediator decides which handler to pick based on the query or command submitted. And inside the box of Mediator, all it does is just uses some reflection to figure out what to surface as the handler. Okay, and it works alongside your dependency injection container. So without rambling on for too long, what you tend to do is in your services project, you add the Mediator project. So manage NuGet packages, look for MediatR. Let's go ahead and install this. So once this is installed, once this package is installed, what you then get access to is the iRequest interface. And we will be importing using Mediator. And if you want to return something, or rather the return type, so you're essentially, this is the commander query, and this is what it's going to return. So in our cases, we get all cars. So logically, this should return some sort of a list of cars. So let's say enumerable of car. Okay, and let's import this from models. And the way that you specify a handler, and I like to do these in the same file. So I have a query, so this is the trigger. And then I will have the public class get all cars query, and I will just append handler to it. And then I will inherit from iRequest handler. This will accept two things: the information coming in and information going out. So again, if we press F12 and we navigate to the request handler, we will see that it accepts from the iRequest handler of tRequest and unit. So this is a version that is meant to return nothing. So unit is the thing that you return when you don't need to return anything. It's kind of like an empty object. But in our case, the thing that's coming in is the get all cars query, and the thing that is going out is the enumerable of car. Okay, let's go ahead and get this class, implement the interface. So at this point, you have the handle. This is what's going to get triggered by Mediator, and this is what's going to return some cars, right? So let's go ahead and make this, or let's not make this asynchronous, but let's return task from result, and we will just make a new car array where we can just return some sample cars. So a new car, and let's say name, I don't know, what's the coolest car? Ford. And the second coolest car, Toyota. I don't know what people drive these days. This is a car array. Let's go ahead and see what it's crying about. So it seems like there is some typing. You know what? I had a good day today. Let's not ruin it with silly errors, right? Yeah, I just have a handle where I return some information from. If I need to do my dependency injection, I can. I just create a constructor and do dependency injection here if needed, right? So if we need to inject the database or whatnot, we do it here, okay? So we got this. What do we do next? How do we actually trigger it? Well, remember the three parts. We have the command or query. In our case, we have a query right here. Third part is the handler. The thing is that the mediator is going to invoke. And the first part that we need is the mediator itself, right? The thing that is going to do the triggering. So to actually register the mediator with your web API is in your web API, you will need to again manage NuGet packages. You will need to browse for Mediator, and in here you will look for mediator.extensions.microsoft dependency injection, and this is the part that's going to let you load Mediator in your application, okay? And basically put it in the container, scan the assembly for all the handlers and stuff, and load them into your dependency injection container, which is essentially what Mediator does on startup. So let's go to startup and let's go ahead and register Mediator. So add Mediator. And first you will get squiggly lines. So what you want to do is provide the assembly where your handlers live, okay? So the important bit is the handlers, okay? So when it registers these handlers, it will, based on the types that are coming in, it will know how to trigger this handler because it has registered it, okay? So when we do type of, we will need to grab any class from the assembly where the handlers live. So get all cars query, because all we need to do is just reach the assembly. Let's go ahead and import this. Okay, and yeah, just to restate, as I have a project reference to these services here. So minimal setup, what you do then is from your controller, in your home controller, some business logic, you go ahead, you cut it, you go to your query and you move your business logic into this handler here, and what you end up with is a constructor where you're going to inject a mediator. You're gonna initialize a field, okay, and then what you're going to do is you're just going to create a task, and you're gonna return the thing that the handler is going to return. So car, let's import the models. And then you're going to use the mediator, and you're going to call send. And then if you need to populate the query from the route, then you do stuff like from route, from query, from body or whatever, and you grab your command here. So get all cars query, and you have your query, and then you pass the query, and then this will return the data that you need. If you're not populating the query from the body, route, or query or anything like that, you can just go ahead, grab this type, and just pass it here, okay? Just like that. All right, and this will suffice. All right, so here you can say that we are going to be providing some type of an iRequest, and then it's going to return that return type that we specify for the iRequest, right? So we're returning this. And so that's pretty much the get all cars. We can go ahead and name this an API controller. We can set the route to cars, and since this is going to be the index, so we can call it http get. Don't need that bit, and this should work. Okay, so let's go ahead and launch this, and we'll do a little test. So here I'm gonna grab the URL, and actually already opened up the browser for me. I'm gonna go to /cars, and here I'm gonna get an array of my cars. Okay, so I don't know, this example doesn't get simpler than this. 3 parts, as I've stated before. You have the iMediator, you have the handler, and then you have the request. And yeah, all you do is you just add the mediator here. You don't need anything else to get started. Another thing I'm going to show you is basically the command part. So queries are when you have get statements. If you have post for create, but for update, and delete for delete, what you're going to do is for your cars, you're going to create a folder called commands, and in here you're going to say create car command, right? And from that point on, you just know where you already know what to expect, right? So you have services. You're gonna have some logic that is associated to cars, and then right. Do you want to get information about cars, or do you want to do something with cars? So for the create car command, you do the exact same thing. You do iRequest, and then whatever you want to return, maybe some kind of message. And I'm gonna show you what I do with this response type in just a second, or what I like to do. So, and again, the same thing. I keep these in the same file because basically, then it just has the command, and I know if the handler is just gonna be where the command is. So I'm not gonna have a file explosion. It's gonna be easier to read and find what I'm looking for. Okay, so create command handler. Let's inherit from iRequest handler. The thing that's going in is create car command. The thing that's going out is the string. Create the body, implement the handler, and I'll throw not implement. I'm not actually gonna implement this because the story is pretty much the same. We go into the home controller. We create a post handle. We are going to be posting some JSON. This is going to be a create car command. Call it command. And send it to the mediator, right? That's pretty much end of story for the mediator. But then you basically, as you're using it more and more, there's going to be things that you find that you can basically simplify or abstract, or the things that you want to do or would have rather known in the first place before you started. Okay, and this is what I'm going to tell you about now, so you can avoid some common pitfalls, right? Or not even pitfalls, just not impact, basically have a positive impact on your programming experience. Okay, so first of all, let's go ahead and create a pipe. Okay, so a pipe for Mediator is like the middleware, and it's just some stuff that you can do to your request and the response when it's coming in and going out, right? So how we have the middleware for ASP.NET Core, the pipe is middleware for the Mediator. Okay, so let's go ahead and bring this in, and I'm just gonna put it in the infrastructure here. So I would have an infrastructure folder. And I would have this is something I implement quite a bit with my APIs. So user ID pipe, and you would have to inherit from pipeline behavior. So this is the mediator interface that will essentially say do something with the message that's coming in. So we don't have to specify any concrete types. So T in and T out. Stuff that's coming in and stuff that's going out. So we will basically the mediator will handle these types when sending messages about. Okay, the primary thing that we have here is the thing that we want to do with the message. And if you know how middleware works, if you don't, I'll link have an annotation to the video, right? So this is essentially middleware. If you know how middleware works, you know what to do here, and you know the power of this. And hopefully I will be able to demonstrate you this. So what you will have with your API is something like a access token coming in, and what you want is to read the user ID. So what you would usually do is you have the user ID living on the user object here with the claims, and then what you would have to do is grab my claim, and I would have to grab the command, and I'll have to get the user ID, and I will have to assign it to the claim, and then there might be other stuff that you need to do, and before you know it, your controllers are fat again. Okay, so what you do is you go into your startup, you say, right, I want to expose the HTTP context to my services, so we're gonna add HTTP context accessor. I think that's the function, yeah. And what we can do now is in our user ID pipe, we can create a constructor, and we can say that we want the HTTP context accessor. Let's grab the accessor, and then we'll grab the HTTP context from the accessor, just like that. Make sure we create a field. Okay, so we have the HTTP context. We can go ahead and grab the claim that we need. So HTTP context, user claims first or default, and let's say we want the type that equals to claim types. That is a name identifier, right? So we're grabbing the user ID. Okay, and yeah, user ID. Let's not forget to select the value. And yeah, since the user ID, how do we attach it to the command? So we need to know that the command is of a certain type, so we can actually attach the user ID to it. So what I tend to do is I would have something like a base request. Okay, so base request, and on this base request I have some base information that I would like to populate on my requests. Okay, so I would have string user ID. Okay, and then for my queries I will just do this here for the get all cars, since we got it working. So that's basically what I want to do, and I will just add the base request here, put a comma, and this should work. What will happen now in the user pipe? So on the base request we just put the user ID, then you put the base request on any of your queries or the commands where you expect to have a what's it called, a user ID. And then in your pipe, I'm not gonna put this user ID, but because I don't have any users attached, what we can do is we can see if the request is a base request that we will need to import, and I can say br, and then for the base request user ID I can say whoop, right? So that's my user ID, and then we can go ahead and call next. And if there's anything else you need to do, you do it here. If you probably want to await on this and make this async if you want to do something after. I don't, and you can apply the same pattern with the responses, and I do that exact thing. This user pipe, the Northwind Traders example shows you how to implement a try catch and I think a time pipe, which basically times your request. If your request is too long, log it, and then your developers know what code path is slow. But yeah, if you don't need to do anything after, just return the next and you should be good. So let's go ahead and watch this or see this happen somehow. We can go to the all cars query and we can just to the forward. Let's go ahead and append the what's it called, request user ID. Okay, let's go ahead and run this, and oh, I forgot to actually add the pipe, right? Silly me. All you need to do to add the pipe is you go to the startup and you go to services, add scope, and you will need to provide type of, because it's a generic, so it's a little bit weird how you add this pipe. So let's go ahead. I can never remember. Kind of the same way how you add the other services, but just grab the interface, put it in first, remove the generics, and make sure you have the comma there. And then for the second parameter you want to do the same type of, and then you want to grab the class again, go back to the startup, paste it here, and again just remove the generics and make sure that you leave the comma in there. Then we want to import this. Okay, so we essentially implemented a generic interface with a generic implementation, and Mediator will automatically handle grabbing this pipe. And by the way, if you have multiple pipes, the order that you add them in, right, they will be executed in that order. So top to bottom, first to last. Okay, kind of the same how you add your middleware, and the order in which you add these pipes, that's the order in which they're going to be executed. Okay. But I'm only gonna have one pipe here. Let's go ahead, run this, and let's take a look. Okay, so let's go to cars. So it looks like I have passed an HTTP context accessor instead of an HTTP context accessor. My bad, rookie mistakes still happen all the time. You're never gonna run away from them. So yeah, get the cars. Object reference not set to an instance of an object. Obviously, just a hindrance at this point. I'll leave this in because this is actually production ready code, but rather we just don't have a user in there. Okay, so third time's lucky. Let's go. I always do these tutorials, no prep, just tell it how I know it, right? But yeah, anyway, we have the ID, right? So the pipe is working. If you have users signed in, you would automatically put some properties, okay? And there is other stuff. You can put caching in these pipes. You can grab stuff from the database. You can do entity framework transactions. So you can mark your queries as iQueryable and or iQuery that will inherit from iRequest, and you can check the type here. If it is an iQuery, you can go ahead and disable change tracking on your entity framework. If it's an iCommand, which is again inheriting from iRequest before that, you can put your handlers and transactions inside these. So there is a lot of things that you can do here. Another thing that I want to talk about is the response, okay, and how I handle it. So let's go ahead, close all of this. For the response, let's go ahead and create the response class. So the response class for me is usually static, so the primary thing that I'm after is a response class that will be of some type, so it's going to return something. A couple of things that I'm after is just the type and the data that I'm returning, so t data, and then I would have stuff like prop string message, and I would have prop bool error. Right, so this is my go-to. Here is where I return my data. So let's say I would send a request to create a car. What I would do is return the data for the created car. In the messages, I would say car is created. If I need translations, I don't need to handle the translations inside my spa. I can have all the translation on the services, and if I'm moving my spa to something else, I don't need to redo the translations, or all the translations can be done on the service. So the message, that's why the message is there. And then the bool error, again, you can then write a service on your front end to sort of expect a response like this and know how to handle it automatically. So I think it's important to have this wrapper on your data that you're returning, so you can basically then you can have middleware on your spas to sort of handle the responses from your API in a more graceful way. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at how would we return this, right? So let's go ahead and yeah, in here we will create a car. Let's go ahead and say that we will return a response of type car. So we're going to create a car, we're going to save it to the database, etc. And we would have to change the type that we're returning. So instead of string, we're now returning response car. We're going to do the same thing here. So let's say if false, if something fails, right? If car already exists, if you don't have permissions to create cars, what you do is you implement a function on your response and you do something along the lines of public static response t fail t, and then you say new response. You create a constructor, right, where you have t data string message, and you have bool error, and you assign all this data. So data equals data, message equals message, and error equals error. And then for the fail, you would accept some t data and then string message, and t data can be null, so we can do something along the lines of this. So pass it second and pass a default, because it can be an integer, so we can just add a default here. And when we do create a new response, we can just say that, right, pass the data, pass the message and just say that the result is false. And then if you need the okay or good response, you kind of go here. Okay, so okay, for T data, that now I try to pass this first here. And by the way, for those pipes, you can also put validation in there with Fluent validators or the built-in Microsoft validation, or rather not Microsoft, ASP.NET Core validation. And I think the Northwind Traders has that example. But yeah, actually no, the error here is false. The error here is true, right? So what you do in your command is you would say response fail for car, and we would say already exists, right? And that's pretty much it. What would it say? I guess we would need to return it from task from result. Okay, so something like this. Obviously it's never gonna execute, otherwise we just say from result response okay, and we would say new car. What name could we do? I don't know, Mazda. And we would say car created. Okay, so this would be a generic response. Is it struggling with a parameter that I put in the wrong place? Yeah, okay, nice. So yeah, this is pretty much wrap all this data that you return in the response object, so then you can basically handle those responses on your backend, right? Or sorry, your front end rather. So let's go ahead and see what this looks like. Let's see what the error is. Okay, so yeah, so no longer returning this. We are returning response of type car. And yeah, that should be good. So let's start this. Let's start up Postman so we can post something. I don't think I can do it for the browser, so here we are. Let's grab it. Let's put the URL, post it, send it, and we got nothing, obviously, because we want to post to cars. Still nothing. The cars controller, surely. Oh, there we go. So unsupported media type, because I'm not passing anything. So let's say body, raw, JSON, empty object. Let's send it, and here we have it, right? So we create a new car, Mazda, car created, error, false. You get the gist, right? And now that we return this data, we can have an interceptor. Has there been an error? If nope, should do proceed. If there is an error, we can display a pop-up. There's been an error, right? Or initiate retries, etc., right? So it could become cumbersome to basically have these responses and basically having this response in the iRequest handler. So you can always have your wrappers. So let's have the wrappers, right? Wrappers folder, request wrapper. Again, this is going to be an interface. Let's create this. This is going to inherit from iRequest. We're going to have a T, and this is going to be a response of T, right? And we have a T. Okay, so as you can see, we're just basically proxying. So now we're bucking it, I don't know, wrapping it up to basically have a little bit of a neater approach to this. And we do the same for the iRequest handler. So we copy this, we put this here as a reference, and then we can create a public interface handler wrapper, and let's say T in, T out, and this inherits from iRequest. T in comes in, T out goes out. Okay, and I think that's it. Am I missing some brackets here? Yep. And I'm probably missing some types where T-in is, let's check where, yeah, where T-request is T-response, yeah. But here we could rather say something along the lines of where T-in inherits from iRequest wrapper t out. Okay, so now we're sort of crystallizing our extension of the mediator to sort of use these response types. So now if we go to create car command, so we can have a request wrapper, and instead we have a car, and we have a handler wrapper, and instead of response we also just have a car. Okay, but we still return response car. It's just it just becomes neater interfacing. And by the way, just as I mentioned in the pipe, what you can do, if I bring up the user ID pipe, let's say we have the result, so result equals await next. If we can make this async. At the end, let's go ahead and return the result. Here we can do if results is response of some type, I don't know, car. Let's bring this in, and let's say the car response, right? We can do results, or let's say, hold up, car response. Let's say the data is going to be a car because we know it, and we can say that the name, let's append to it checked, right? So we checked it. Cool. Yeah, let's go ahead and try to run this, make sure everything still works. Okay, so here's Postman. Let's post again, and you will see the response that we get has been indeed checked by the pipe. So again, if you need to do something with your request that it's coming in, make sure to inherit from a specific type, or you can check for a specific type in your pipes. And when you return the response, again, you can do so through your pipe, and as I demonstrated, by surfacing the HTTP context. And maybe if you need to surface the database or some cache, you can do it in your pipes as well. Okay, but this is essentially it. So real 3 parts: the mediator itself, the thing that sends stuff around, the command or the query, it's essentially the message that triggers the third part, the handler, and then you have the pipes, which is really just middleware. Okay, and this is basically the base request. Response is how I personally interact with the requests coming in and the responses coming out. If I need to interact with them, I try to bunch them up. The response is more important. Well, base request is really important for the user ID. I find that to be the main use case. The response, the main use case is for it to be able to be handled gracefully by the front end. Okay, and yeah, another thing is just you just have a service folder for whatever entity you're working with, or the domain area, and then you have the commands for that, you have the queries for that, and I keep my commands and queries along with handlers in a single file, so it kind of keeps the logic together, right? And by the way, if you need to send another command from the handler to another, you can dependency inject Mediator into your handler, and then you can issue another command from one handle to another. Okay, there's also a fire and forget. I'm not going to touch on it too much because I've never had the need to use it. You have the Mediator publish. So what this will do is it will send a notification to a bunch of handlers, and I think it should act as a fire and forget sort of thing, but again, I've never used it, so I don't think you will have a need for it either. But yeah, this is essentially it for this episode. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, leave a like, subscribe. If you still have any questions, make sure to ask them in the comment section. Code is in the description. I also stream on Wednesdays and Sundays, where you get to see me use technologies like Mediator. So make sure to join my Discord channel if you would like me to update you on when I stream, or follow me on Twitter. But yeah, as always, hope to see you in my other episodes.